Hello, my name is Tolg and I exist, therefore I think too much. I explained it on my other video about chapters 25 through 26 of Mirrors, Simple Souls that, yesterday was a bad day. Essentially, I've been sick since Thanksgiving. Had a bad time with Mucinex DM yesterday. I presume because of ADHD. And, yeah, so if I am low energy, we're just gonna blame that. Say I'm doing my best, and if you don't like it, as always, go away. So I am obviously going to rant, because that's what I do. And this one is Beyond Good and Evil by Friedrich Nietzsche. One of us, left off after reading points 1 through 4, chapter 1. So I'm going to pick up at point 5 and through the rants, see how far that gets me. Yep. So, 5, that which causes philosophers to... Oh, right, sorry. Chapter 1 is prejudices of philosophers, so that's what Nietzsche is going over. And so far, generally just doesn't like that everybody is pompous. I was starting to get sick when I made the first video, so I just remember that I ranted a lot. I don't necessarily immediately remember my conclusions, so I'll be picking it up as I go. Number 5, that which causes philosophers to be regarded half distrustfully, half mockingly, is not the oft-repeated discovery how innocent they are, how often and easily they make mistakes and lose their way. In short, how childish and childlike they are. Who the fuck says that about philosophers? I guess, again, as always, Nietzsche and I, whomever is writing any book, normally live in very different times. But, I don't know. Childlike maybe in curiosity and not stopping, the questioning everything. But otherwise, innocent. Oy vey. Oy. Okay, but that there is not enough honest dealing with them. That philosophers are liars. That was something that he said, I think, in point 2. That they kind of talk through their ass. And I think, there's a good amount of philosophers that do a lot of pontificating. But throughout time, in order to be a scholar, you had to have someone to fund you. And so therein, like you see it in, who wrote The Prince? Machiavelli. I can't remember his first name. In his work, word count counts for a lot. There's a means of writing in which you convince the reader or the person presumably funding you that they are intelligent by way of having funded you at all, by way of having read it. And you want to keep it so that they feel intelligent, but that they don't feel insulted. So I wouldn't go so far as to say philosophers are all liars, but I do understand that there is a way of writing that invites an audience to believe that they don't need to put too much work into aligning themselves with your understanding. They don't have to be pushed too far out of their comfort zone. And whatever conclusions they got to already in life are not being threatened by whatever you aim to introduce. And I think that can be, if your entire career, if how you get paid is by philosophy, is by theorizing about morality and the subjectivity therein, it can be dangerous, staking your entire livelihood essentially on how someone else's ego will perceive what it is you have to say. So I think that's where, or rather what Nietzsche is addressing, but I think Nietzsche is a hell of a lot less forgiving about it. And, you know, could play into why he feels so negatively if this is also simultaneously his work. Why am I putting myself out when you refuse to do so? But simultaneously, a third time I said simultaneously, could very well be why he is so well honored in relation to his peers. Does anyone remember his peer's name? Maybe, maybe not. You know? So maybe that should tell you to put yourself out more. Maybe. Anyways, so yeah, he's talking about how everybody is a liar, but that there's not enough honest dealing with them, whereas they all raise a loud and virtuous outcry when the problem of truthfulness is even hinted at in the remotest manner. They loudly outcry when truthfulness is hinted at? Meaning they have to point the finger elsewhere when they're lying, I would assume. They all pose as though their real opinions had been discovered and attained through the self-evolving of a cold, pure, divinely indifferent dialectic, in contrast to all sorts of mystics who, fairer and foolisher, talk of inspiration. I mean, who's to say where their real opinions came from? Some people learn through doing. Other people learn through, I guess, thinking to a great extent. I'm not sure how things work. But yeah, everybody learns differently, and so someone coming to a revelation, I don't think that how you get to an answer should be honored more than the fact that you got to the answer. Oh, rant. That is something that I remember saying at least this year, but I don't remember what month. More recently in times, I've noted that people honor experience more than they honor the end result, and in a person. And yeah, the experience makes a person who they are, but the experience only makes them who they are based on how they react to it, what they choose to do because of it. And therein, I don't think that the experience should be honored more than the person should be honored. I think that humanity needs to adjust where that is concerned. Take two people, put them through the same situation, they're not going to come out the same. So, and I do think that needs to be taken into consideration a little bit more. So yeah, where a bunch of people want to be perceived as perfect where their peers are concerned, and how they concluded whatever it was they concluded, that they need to do so by means of which other people are not going to be able to cut them down for. Whereas, in fact, a prejudiced proposition, idea, or suggestion, which is generally their heart's desire abstracted and refined, is defended by them with arguments sought out after the event. Wouldn't you need time to think about something? Doesn't everybody do that? Where they're only able to argue about something only when they've had a long time afterwards? You come up with the argument way later, and by that point the moment's already passed. Isn't that, common? Does Nietzsche want everybody to be perfect? I think maybe Nietzsche struggled with being the most intelligent guy in the room, and it made him miserable for it. They are all advocates who do not wish to be regarded as such, generally astute defenders also of their prejudices, which they dub truths. To be prejudiced. Well, as much as I understand it, to be prejudiced is to be performative in one direction, more than likely understood to be a negative direction. That you are built up in an understanding, and that you live by that understanding. So to you it would be a truth, but not to everyone else, And therein is subjectivity and objectivity. What is subjective is not always objective, but subjectively to you, it's what you understand. And very far from having the conscience which bravely admits this to itself, very far from having the good taste of the courage which goes so far as to let this be understood, this being that it is a prejudice. Perhaps to warn friend or foe in cheerful confidence and self-ridicule. How can they warn friend or foe in self-ridicule when they don't have the ability to understand self from what you have said? The spectacle of the... That's a word. Forgive me, I will definitely slaughter this word. The spectacle of the Tartuffery of old Kant, equally stiff and decent. Kant is very stiff. Currently reading him, and holy hell. But he does a good, presentation by way of scientific method, where defines what it is he's going to be addressing, gives you the definitions he's working with, then goes into the theory, and then breaks the theory down. I really appreciate that presentation. It just, takes him forever to get to the point. It's very stiff, but it does a good job. With which he entices us into the dialectic by ways that mislead, he does not like Kant, to his categorical imperative, makes us fastidious. Why is that? I don't think this makes sense. Makes us fastidious one's smile. No, I'm not sure that makes sense. Also, just because, and that is, he's struggling with other people understanding something and then disagreeing with what it is that they concluded. And he bears hatred due to it, where, walking away from it going, okay, that's their subjective reality. This is what they were able to conclude. And I can acknowledge how they got to that answer, but that is not the answer I got to. I think that should be the general takeaway rather than an emotional one. It should just be a logical one of that was as much as they could understand. And I'm capable of taking 2 steps past that. They may be wrong, but I don't understand why he has to be mad about that, or why he would conclude that they are liars for it. That wouldn't be my immediate takeaway. I just think that, they did the best they could. Okay, back to the thing that doesn't make sense. Makes us fastidious one's smile. What the fuck? We who find no small amusement in spying out the subtle tricks of old moralists and ethical preachers. He likes being upsetting. I can recognize that in other people. I do that too. When I'm uncomfortable, mostly, but maybe not even that. I'm generally uncomfortable, and I don't always like being upsetting. But if I'm being upsetting, I have learned to settle into it. Because it happens a good amount. Or, still more so, the hocus pocus in mathematical form. Is there math and philosophy? feel like I missed something again. Probably. There's math in everything, but alright. By means of which Spinoza has, as it were, clad his philosophy in mail and mask. Math is its own language, so if you were to cover your philosophy by using math, most people wouldn't be able to ride along, so you could fucking say anything you want, really. I guess that's what he's mad at. Just wants people to speak plainly, rather than all the show and pomp. And I guess I can agree with that, but like I said, most people have to write in order to get their paycheck. In fact, the love of his wisdom, to translate the term fairly and squarely, in order thereby to strike terror at once into the heart of the assailant who should dare to cast a glance on that invincible maiden. Which maiden? Maiden being wisdom? That Pallas Athene. How much of personal timidity and vulnerability does this masquerade of a sickly recluse betray? Presents his wisdom as sickly when it is in fact invincible? Oh, no. The masquerade is that it is invincible when in fact Nietzsche believes that it is personal timidity and vulnerability on behalf of fucking Spinoza. I don't know who Spinoza is, so I have no opinion on that. And that is just pure opinion. There's no fact nor argument made. This is just shit talking to shit talk. Nietzsche's a very angry guy. This isn't even philosophy at this point. This is just shit talking. This is gossip. There was a sentiment before we had phones and TVs. I read it in another book of mine. But the other book was fiction, so stand by it or don't, whatever. But when books started being published en masse for general entertainment's sake, newspapers and books were seen as a means for certain classes to gossip and network through it as well, to garner political persuasion. And so it was essentially seen the same as, well, that was a lot of S's. I heard all of the S's. Regarded the same as older generations looking at younger generations stuck on the phone, saying, get your nose out of the phone, go do something with your day. That was essentially the same as people reading. It was like, go do something. Go earn your keep. Go be useful. Stop reading that book. That's all you ever do, and it's ruining the youth of the nation. And that's my takeaway from that 1.5 was just, this is a gossip column. This is gossip for gossip's sake. He's just shit-talking his peers. So, point 6. It has gradually become clear to me what every great philosophy up till now has consisted of, namely the confession of its originator and a species of involuntary and unconscious autobiography. Yeah, if someone's going to write something, they're writing it from who they are, not from who someone else is. Did Nietzsche think that he was writing from someone else's perspective? And moreover, that the moral or immoral purpose in immoral is it's said in parentheses, so he still speculates that other people are coming from from design of misleading you purposefully, that they are pointedly wrong. And I guess I disagree with Nietzsche in that respect. I prefer to believe that people do not do that. I stand to be corrected a lot of the time, especially in my own experiences, but where philosophy is concerned, I would assume someone's going into it purely based on their curiosity. At least I would hope. In every philosophy, moral or immoral purpose in every philosophy has constituted the true vital germ out of which the entire plant has always grown. Which is curiosity, right? Indeed, to understand how the this is one hell of a word, how the abstrusest metaphysical assertions of a philosopher have been arrived at, it is always well and wise to first ask oneself, why do we need to ask ourselves? Didn't you conclude that it all came from the same germ? Why can't you pronounce which germ it came from? Why continue to pontificate? This is what you dislike in your peers. Why are you doing it now? Okay, so we're asking ourselves, what morality do they or does he aim at? Sexist. Sorry. That's a bad joke, but I don't know why he needed to differentiate between they and he. Whatever. I mean, generally, yeah, you should be doing that whenever you talk to anybody or read anything, is why would you perceive it as though they would be coming from where you're coming from? Unless you perceive yourself as the center of the universe. I feel like point 6 is just him understanding that other people exist. And extending that grace onto them that they're not him. Accordingly, I do not believe that an impulse to knowledge is the father of philosophy. Yeah, I would say impulse to knowledge is synonymous with curiosity, but I guess I disagree with Nietzsche on that then. But that another impulse, here as elsewhere, has only made use of knowledge, and mistaken knowledge, in parentheses, again just shitting on something to shit on it, as an instrument. Manipulation? Maybe he's getting at, this is a means of manipulation by those who would want to run society and societal conclusions. Political manipulation could be. But that, another impulse as an instrument. But whoever, he doesn't name it, and I hate, wants you to draw the same conclusion he's drawing, but leads you into it. It's a very, how do I put that? I want to say egotistical, but controlling. It's indicative of having control issues. Like you went without being paid attention to, and so you demand a platform. But whoever considers the fundamental impulses of man with a view to determining how far they may have here acted as inspiring genie, the jinn, because this spelling is more indicative of jinn rather than genie. And then in parentheses goes on to say, or as demons and kobolds, which, depending on the culture, demon doesn't necessarily translate the same way. I also contemplated jinn the other day, and I'm not sure really if jinn is understood to be an entirely metaphysical being, or if it is both, or a physical being with metaphysical traits. It would seem to be the latter. Sorry, sidetrack. So we're still trying to figure out what the fuck he's getting at, where the father of philosophies, or falafels. Falafels are good. Who created the falafel? The father of philosophy is not curiosity. And then likened it to people acting as the jinn, and the jinn are great deceivers in order to get what they want, and then vamp people's energy. So father of philosophy is a means to get from people, and just indicating more manipulation. with a negative attribute of the person who is doing the manipulating, we'll find that they have all practiced philosophy at one time or another. Everyone has. Philosophy is presumably just morality and ethics, trying to seek out what makes most logical sense behind why things are the way things are. So yeah, everybody's practicing philosophy. I'm lost. I've lost myself. Philosophers have to determine their manipulation, and they will find that they have all practiced philosophy at one time or another, and that each one of them would have been only too glad to look upon itself as the ultimate end of existence and the legitimate lord over all the other impulses. Yeah, I'm lost. Okay, so the person is not acting as the inspiring genie. Genii. It's plural. 2 I's at the end. Genii. I'm sorry. So that would have helped me understand the sentence more. I apologize. The impulses are the manipulators. And I guess he's making an argument that everybody is controlled by a fundamental set of impulses. Instincts? So, sorry to be so crass, but I'm pretty damn sure fundamental impulses would be, eat, shit, sleep. Those are the most fundamental impulses, instincts. And then beyond that, I'm not sure that one could consider it fundamental, as that now introduces the subjectivity to each person and how they wire themselves, how they survive by, what they need to survive. So anyways, their impulses have practiced philosophy. And then their impulses would have been only too glad to look upon itself as the ultimate end of existence and legitimate lord over all the other impulses. No. The person who is considering the impulses as inspiration, that person will find that they have all practiced philosophy at one time or another, and that each one of those people that consider their impulses as inspiration would have been only too glad to look upon itself as the ultimate end of existence. If you contemplate your impulses, you want to end existence? I found out today that Nietzsche committed suicide. And I feel like this is slightly relevant. A lack of impulse control, and an individual that has a need to conquer everything, as prior mentioned in like point 2.1, and then this indicating that lack of impulse control and understanding the impulses that apparently are fundamental or lead someone against whatever it is would make one want to be the end of existence. Seems mildly relevant. Maybe a little bit more than mild, but I think the reason that I just lowered my tone is because it's daunting, And I'm not sure why he would indicate that this is something to hate other people for. Maybe he, after just identifying other people as people beyond him, receded back into himself to garner an ounce of control. I'm slightly broke in recognizing that he neither has control over others beyond himself and himself. Am I overthinking it? I could be. For every impulse is imperious. No, it's not. You can control your impulses. and as such, attempts to philosophize. Not all my impulses attempt to philosophize. Some of my impulses exist and I don't even know why. I have to sit on my hands because there's no reason to try to walk into that door, you know? Some things don't make sense as to why my brain thought that that was a good idea. And therein, some things don't even need to be contemplated. I don't need to sit there and contemplate why my brain just thought to walk into the door. I just need to not walk into the damn door. This is not an actual example. It's just the best thing I could come up with to try to explain. There's a word for that. People overuse it. Where, things enter your head and they're not necessarily of the line of logic by which you normally follow. I can't think of the generalized term used. So anyways, he has control issues. To be sure, in the case of scholars, in the case of really scientific men, it may be otherwise, better, if you will. There may be, better, if you will, there may really be such a thing as an impulse to knowledge. Could be, but that would still be curiosity. Some kind of small, independent clockwork. Survival. One's ego, one's need to survive, and therein identify reality so as to better survive. That's why curiosity exists. Independent clockwork, which, when well wound up, works away industrially to that end. Was he stuck in survival? He's perpetually trying to understand everything around him? How exhausting. I'm not saying you should, stop trying to understand things, but I think people should rest, Enjoy moment by moment. So the clockwork of lack of impulse control is perpetually ticking away, forcing him to philosophize about every single damn thing that happens, even if it's a random thought that interjects in his head. He thinks about it to its end. Exhausting. And that's the clockwork, which, when well wound up, works away industrially to that end without the rest of the scholarly impulses taking any material part therein. The actual interests of the scholar, therefore, are generally in quite another direction, in the family perhaps, or in money-making, or in politics. Okay, he has now identified subconscious versus conscious. And my understanding, where his subconscious is dealing with why did this thought just enter my head, and his conscious is how do I adjust my monetary spending for my family, what's happening politically around me. So he's just perpetually, in every regard, stuck in identifying reality and trying to make sense of it so that he can easily survive and help the survival of those around him. This man's exhausted. Okay, in family perhaps, or in money-making, or in politics. It is, in fact, almost indifferent at what point of research his little machine is placed, and whether the hopeful young worker becomes a good philologist. I like the word. A mushroom specialist or a chemist. I'm feeling like, Nietzsche, while I enjoy Nietzsche's work so far, you may have had a more peaceful life had he become a mushroom specialist. And he should have. People should plant more mushrooms. They help put nutrients back into the earth. Do it. Go plant mushrooms. He is not characterized by becoming this or that. Okay. I don't know that was needed. But I have ranted so much that maybe it was. And I just lost the plot. In the philosopher, on the contrary, there is absolutely nothing impersonal. Everything is personal. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And above all, his morality furnishes a decided and decisive testimony as to who he is, that is to say, in what order the deepest impulses of his nature stand to each other. Yeah, maybe maybe he should have taken a break every now and again. Like, there is a point of philosophy. I'm going to end it at 2 points and just do point 5 and 6 because I'm still recovering from being sick and I'm poorly recovering at that. But there is a point of philosophy and I'd have to go out of my way to find it, and fuck that, I'm not doing it. You can Google it yourself. Ha! That says, you take man's privacy away from him, and he's made aware that his privacy is taken away from him, then so too do you take his comforts and lead that man into insanity. And I guess if Nietzsche felt that every aspect of his person needed to be thought about to such an extent and then displayed for the world to see because that is his profession, maybe he led himself into an insanity he felt he couldn't walk away from. Ouch. Okay, on that note, take care of yourselves, get some rest. Know when to do something and when it's out of your control. And memento mori, not to hyper-focus on when death could happen, but understand that in death does happen, to take it moment by moment and give yourself what you need based on the moment. Stop trying to play into expectations of you and start playing into who you are. Advice from someone who is sick. And take it or leave it. Good night. Bye-bye.